All right, Steve here again. What we're going to be doing now is we're going to be adding in some what I call pentatonic expansions. We're obviously moving towards the fact of being able to play diatonic scales and modes and all those kind of things. But in the effort to get there, what we don't want to lose is the feel that we create when we're doing pentatonics, because pentatonics are really important. You know, with pentatonic scales, we're doing all of those kind of things with our essential bends and all that kind of stuff, and pentatonic licks and movements and all that kind of stuff. And so one of the things you have to be careful of is as you start moving into diatonic scales or modes or whatever you want to call them, sometimes we lose the pentatonic feel. And what we want to be able to do is, as I've talked about before, is move between levels. You know, you try and see multiple things at the same time. So you might be doing some pentatonic licks and then you do some diatonic stuff and that sort of thing. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to take the A minor pentatonic and we're going to expand it by adding some notes into it. And then we're going to do a little bit of jamming with it and see where we go from there. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take this minor pentatonic. We're going to add in one of the most colorful notes that you can play, which is called the second or the ninth. Okay? Now, when we use terms like two and, when you're talking about a flatted whatever, a flat 7 chord or things like that, those terms, those theory terms come from the major or diatonic scale, the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do scale, which again, we're going to get into the theory of that, just not this week. So, for instance, when you talk about a pentatonic scale, penta only has 5 notes. We're not referring to that scale when we say, oh, play me a D sus 4. We're not referring to the pentatonic. The pentatonic is its own little unique thing that we use for writing solos or riffs or things like that. But when we talk about anything to do with theory, we're always talking about the major scale, the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do scale. Now, we talked a little bit about that when we were introducing the major and minor chords. And again, it's all going to come together soon. But this week, what we're going to do is we're just going to introduce some new notes. So the second would be the second note of the A minor scale, which for us is going to be the note B. We're going to add in the note B into the pentatonic scale. And you notice even by just adding that note, it adds a lot of color. And one of the main reasons, first of all, because it's new, but second of all, because it's actually enabling us to have for the first time a half step. And so what's really important about that ninth or that second that we're adding in, I'm calling it a second and a ninth because they both mean the same thing in music theory. So throughout this segment, I may call it a ninth, I may call it a second, but just please understand that it's the same note. So what's happening then is I can add that in all over the place. So the note is actually B. So we have another B sitting here. And we have another B there. Now, if you remember the little thing that we did when we were learning how to play the A's all over the fretboard, if you think about it, if I put my pinky on B here, the octave is here, and then here. So those are the B's. Those are the notes that I'm adding in the second or the ninth, okay? So for instance, I could be playing a pentatonic idea, and then all of a sudden I go into... and I play something where I'm just embellishing around that new color tone, that second, okay? So there's a few different things I'm going to talk about today. The first thing I'm going to do is just load this up with a couple of new notes, and then we're going to start talking about movement. So one of the first things for us to do is just start exploring the sound of that second. Okay, so I can still play completely pentatonic, but then on occasions add in that note. Now, I could emphasize it by actually landing on it and then letting it ring out. Okay, I could play it in conjunction with the other pentatonic notes. Okay, one of the fun things that I like to do when I'm soloing is I like to get creative with my movements. Okay, it's called intervallic movement is what I call it. So instead of just playing up and down, what I'm always trying to do is figure out interesting ways of playing. Intervallic movement would be like string skipping, or just shaking up the direction in which you're playing. So instead of just going up and back down, I'm trying to think about just creative ways of kind of moving in and out, which is what I use meandering for. That's how I learned how to do those things, wasn't when I was meandering, which we've practiced before. Instead of just going up and down all the time, I started trying to think about just trying to find different ways of moving, and then all of a sudden I started realizing that for me personally, I really like the sound of that in my soloing. So I wasn't just going up and back down all the time. I was trying to think about I really liked the sound of that. That was just kind of something that made sense in my head and certainly made sense in my heart in terms of the way I like the music to sound. So I'm going to jam a little bit for you, and then you're going to be able to jam over this track as well. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by just jamming a little bit using just the pentatonic. And again, I'm going to use movement. I'm going to use phrasing like we've talked about. I'm going to use the slurring techniques, the hammer-ons, pull-offs, slides, bends, all those sorts of things. Dynamic variation, trying to play fast, trying to play slow. I'm going to try and integrate all of those things in. The rhythm pyramid, I'm thinking about bump, 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 decka, 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 all those kind of things. And then even free time. We're going to get more, as we continue on, we're going to talk more and more about how sometimes you can do things that don't really make any sense, but they have a really powerful musical impact. But as I've discussed before, the goal is being able to go back to something that makes musical sense. If all I do is play nothing, non-musical elements, it doesn't really sound like music. In my head, I'm doing a million things, but for the listener, they're not really getting it.